Welcome to Module 2 of the Zoning for Climate Resilience Municipal Land Use Commission training, offered by the Connecticut Institute for Resilience and Climate Adaptation. Module 2 will cover specific zoning strategies that can address climate vulnerabilities. In this module, you will learn specific zoning techniques that municipalities can adopt and/or revise to enhance the climate resilience of their communities. Regulations that fall under these topics are generally straightforward and give adaptation opportunity against climate impacts such as increased precipitation, excessive heat, flooding, and other impacts associated with climate change. It should be noted that each strategy we discuss should be tailored to the specific needs of the municipality. Not all strategies and tools will be appropriate in all places and contexts. Module 2 Table of Contents. We will discuss in further detail transfer of development rights, or TDR, minimum lot size, maximum lot coverage, parking minimum reduction or abolishment, prohibitions to substantial improvements in flood-prone areas and overlay districts. First, we will discuss a non-traditional zoning technique of transfer of development rights and its possible influence on climate resilience. These programs have traditionally been designed to preserve and protect natural or historic resources for the benefit of the public, but they could be used to promote climate resilience by limiting development in areas of higher climate risk and encouraging that development in less sensitive areas. Transferable development rights, or TDRs, are a regulatory technique allowing development rights to a property to be severed, transferred, and relocated to another parcel of land. The landowner retains the title and other rights to the property and may sell or exchange the land title or development rights separately. The asset of a landowner is preserved with a TDR program by observing their right to build in a less sensitive area as opposed to a vulnerable location. The development rights are expressed as a conservation easement recorded in the land records. TDRs can direct development out of vulnerable areas by utilizing sending zones and allowing the development rights to be brought into effect in receiving zones. This can allow more density in a particular area than normally authorized by typical zoning ordinances. TDR programs are an advantageous approach because they can create a win-win situation for landowners and regulators. Permanent protection from further development is granted to the property within a sending zone, and the property owner is financially compensated without major public expenditure. TDRs have the capability to preserve and protect natural resources, ecological functions, open space, and agricultural and historic areas. TDR programs can advance land use management goals of a municipality without restricting needed development or causing a financial burden to landowners. These programs have traditionally been designed to preserve and protect natural or historic resources for the benefit of the public, but they could be used appropriately to promote climate resilience by limiting development in areas of higher climate risk and encouraging development in less sensitive areas. TDR programs can aid in protecting or establishing natural buffers to reduce flooding, protect water supplies and infrastructure, or mitigate ground level heating. TDR programs can specifically address climate-intensified hazards such as sea level rise, flooding, poor water quality, and erosion. It is important to note that creating transferable development rights avoids legal issues with constitutional takings that could arise from restrictive rezoning prohibiting development outright. In the state of Connecticut, General Statute 8.2 enables municipal zoning authorities to implement TDR ordinances. The challenge of such statute is 8-2F, which establishes that development rights can only be directly transferred between a seller and purchaser upon joint application. There is no provision allowing a third party to hold or bank rights until a suitable purchaser is found. To increase the utility of TDR programs for climate resilience and preservation purposes, Connecticut State Legislature should consider revision of a third party. However, 8-2E does allow for development rights to be transferred across municipal boundaries if enabled by the participating municipalities' legislative bodies. Municipalities can work together to design a TDR program for mutual benefits, including climate resilience for their communities. To give a current example within Connecticut, the City of Stamford has adopted a modified TDR program to manage development densities and encourage historic preservation. Instead of traditional sending and receiving areas, the ordinance allows for redefining boundaries of adjacent lots for zoning purposes in a few of the city's densest zoning districts. Adjacent lots can be redefined as larger zoning lots, and the development rights of one tax lot or traditional property boundary can be shifted to an adjacent tax lot within the greater zoning lot. This creates a financial incentive to protect historic property by giving owners the ability to sell or use the development rights in an adjacent property. The development rights can then be used for increased density beyond the base zoning code. Development must still meet parking and setback requirements and height limitations. Stamford's novel use of TDR works within state law by providing for direct transfer of TDR between seller and purchaser. Without the ability to bank TDR credits, TDR programs can be limited in Connecticut. This application could be applied to promoting climate resilience in areas where protection of micro resources would be of value, like shade islands, green space, or creating stormwater retention swales. Next, we will be discussing the use of minimum lot size reduction as a zoning tool to enhance resilience. We quote Desegregate Connecticut in saying, Connecticut's large lot sizes are larger than other states, which is one big reason Connecticut is one of the most expensive states to live in. Zoning reforms such as lot size reduction can assist with affordable housing priorities while simultaneously prep our communities for climate change impacts. Minimum lot size requirements are zoning codes that require developable land parcels to be a minimum size. These codes allow fewer homes to be built within an area, which results in constrained supply, housing cost inflation, and urban sprawl. When larger lot sizes are required, the demand for auto-centric communities are born, which actively contribute to greenhouse gas emissions and make our statewide emission reduction goals harder to achieve. Large lot zoning spreads development and segregates land use into residential or commercial zones. Large lot zoning can be problematic due to excessive road, sewer, and utility costs, with less incoming residential and business revenue to compensate for these costly additions. Development on smaller lots will surely lessen the impact on the environment and taxpayers' cost on utility rates as well. Development on large lot sizes contribute to deforestation, increasing our dependence of transportation vehicles, and overall enhancing climate risks. Reducing minimum lot sizes builds climate resilience by combating climate change at the source and lessening carbon emissions, energy consumption, and deforestation. Large lot sizes influence the loss of forest and farmland by urban sprawl, and by reducing minimum lot sizes, we can simply achieve forest, agricultural land, and municipal resource conservation. Smaller lot sizes may influence cluster development, leaving open space to enhance climate resilience specific to each area. For example, open space can be used for controlled flooding in areas prone to increased flooding, or tree canopy growth in areas prone to increased heat. Open space can create community space or increase wildlife habitat to influence biodiversity and ecological services. Reducing lot sizes can be used as a technique to minimize impervious cover that may impede stormwater management practices and increase flooding disasters during storm surge events. Urban sprawl disrupts the ability of natural landscapes to sequester carbon emissions, therefore contributing to heightened climate change effects. Current land use practices worsen the damage caused by a changing climate. By reducing lot sizes, we can begin to limit urban sprawl and promote housing density to build resilience to predicted environmental impacts. Reduced minimum lot size offers climate resilience as well as creating diverse housing options that appeal to various demographics, including young people, families, and seniors, while increasing the affordability of housing. Owning or renting property becomes more obtainable in all districts of Connecticut and addresses historic, racial, and economic injustice. Research suggests that larger lot size restricts lower income property investment and also pushes the requirement of many individual vehicles that enhance our carbon emissions. With reduced minimum lot sizes, municipal authority continues to grant the type of housing to permit within their community. These decisions of new housing per lot design may include several single-family homes on a smaller lot, a few duplexes, or even apartment housing. In thinking ahead, as mentioned earlier, Connecticut has some of the largest lot size requirements. Our neighbor, Massachusetts, has adopted smaller lot sizes in areas close to public transit to better influence transit-oriented communities and create better housing opportunities. This may be a prospect for Connecticut to consider when also thinking about carbon emission goals and complying with climate incentives. To learn more about the Massachusetts Housing Choice Act, visit the website on your screen. Next, we will be discussing maximum lot coverage and resilience. Maximum lot coverage is the maximum area of a lot allowed by regulation to be covered by impervious surfaces, including the building, driveways, and parking areas, and other surfaces that do not allow for natural water infiltration. Maximum lot coverage can be calculated by the square footage of impervious surface divided by the total lot area. This percentage can be limited by municipal regulation on allowable impervious cover per lot. Municipalities can decrease this percentage to lessen impervious cover and its role in flooding and urban heat as climate change persists. Impervious surfaces can include buildings, structures, asphalt driveways, patios, pools, sheds, roof overhangs, decks, and parking lots, or any surface where water cannot effectively infiltrate to the underlying soil. Maximum lot coverages can be calculated by considering a range of different structures or surfaces depending on how impervious cover is defined. A restrictive approach tends to include only permanent structures. A moderate approach includes driveways and patios, and the most inclusive approach considers pools. Depending on the resiliency needs, a municipality can determine which structures and surfaces are considered impervious and what approach will enhance stormwater management and the resiliency to other climate impacts. Maximum lot coverage ordinances can foster climate resilience by reducing flood risks, prevent water quality threats, and mitigate urban heat island effects. In highly developed areas, reducing the allowable maximum lot coverage per parcel combines resilience with effective stormwater management and may offer open space that can be utilized as flood control, public recreation, or tree canopy growth. Maximum lot coverage ordinances can be tools to promote the use of permeable pavement, inclusion of green space, or stormwater mitigation features. Careful structuring of land use law can accommodate multiple goals, including reduction in impervious pavement, flooding, and sprawl. Simply, a municipal zoning code could include mitigation strategies for lessening the impacts of impervious pavement. For example, adding in trees or stormwater containment features like bioswales or infiltration basins could be calculated in as reductions in impervious surface to both encourage mitigation and avoid regulation designed to discourage particular forms of development, such as affordable and multifamily, that would otherwise be allowed. Stormwater management regulations also apply and could be met with some of these mitigation strategies. Our first example is tree planting. The increase of impervious surfaces throughout natural landscapes derives negative environmental impacts. Water cannot naturally soak into impervious surfaces. Therefore, it accumulates and collects pollutants and then rushes them into our waterways, causing harm to ecosystems and increasing flood risks. Planting trees in highly impervious areas can reduce flooding as well as intercept heavy rainfall, thus retaining stormwater runoff. Tree canopy cover can also offer urban heat relief and save money on cooling costs. For densely populated urban areas, the New York Model Codes suggest that property owners should plant one tree for every 200 square feet of impervious surface to lessen the effects of impervious surfaces. Our second example is permeable pavement. To better manage stormwater, permeable pavement with a porous surface gives an alternative. These surfaces allow for water to run through it as opposed to settling on top and includes an underlying stone reservoir. This reservoir allows for the water to slowly infiltrate the soil and acts as a filter to catch pollutants. Although not as strong or cost-effective as traditional pavements, eco-friendly pavement can be used for driveways, sidewalks, and lower traffic areas, still making a positive impact on water drainage. Next, we will be discussing the climate resilience benefits of the abolishment or reduction of parking minimums. Depending on rural and urban classifications of your area, the necessity of parking minimum abolishment may not be beneficial. Taking into consideration the needs and goals of your municipality, it is imperative when evaluating parking minimum reduction and/or abolishment. In this picture, most of us can relate to seeing a large parking area with very few cars utilizing the space. Specific zoning codes have influenced the large usage of impervious cover here, which decreases the climate resilience and profitable value to the space. Parking minimums are municipal zoning ordinances that mandate a certain number of off-street parking spaces per commercial and residential property owners to provide and maintain. These requirements are usually determined by the square footage of a pertaining structure or number of residential units. Using Hartford as an example, parking minimums have been abolished citywide. As we can see here, land to be utilized for parking has tripled in between the time frame of about 1960 to 2000. This is a very typical trend we have seen across many American cities and has led to what some say the collapse of a city, where we see buildings being torn down to accommodate parked cars. Residential population has declined and commuter traffic has increased. As Hartford has eliminated parking minimums, they have seen encouragement in downtown development in more profitable and useful spaces that offer economic stability, such as residential and business buildings, without the burden of parking minimums. Parking minimums can be quite problematic and damaging to the economies and resiliency of our communities. Parking minimums influence profitless value to urban businesses, auto-centric communities and greenhouse gas emissions, cost inflation that is passed on to consumers and residents, and the structure and function of urban spaces. Overall, by mandating parking minimums, land is prioritized for the least economic benefit, parked cars. Municipalities can create more resilient communities by reducing their parking minimum codes. Specifically, this reduction will reduce impervious cover, which can then be converted to green space, adding the benefits of improved air quality and biodiversity within the area. Impervious cover reduction also has the benefits of mitigating urban heat and decreasing flood events with enhanced stormwater management. Because large parking areas create large gaps in between businesses, auto-centric communities are produced, and we contribute to high greenhouse gas emissions. With less impervious cover and less required parking, our cities become more walkable and we lose our dependence on cars and decrease our emissions overall. Parking minimum reduction gives business owners the opportunity to expand their business or utilize their space as a valuable resource. This can add more profit to their business and enhance local economies. Following the act of reduced parking minimums comes the benefits of increased housing opportunities, which leads to more affordable housing, larger recreation and community spaces, and enhanced public transportation systems, which decrease our overall carbon footprint. Land can be better used to mitigate strong environmental impacts due to climate change by utilizing green space opportunity. The Connecticut zoning reform that took place in 2021 within Public Act 2129 capped parking minimums and may not require a minimum number of parking spaces for new housing units in excess of 1 space for studio and 1-bedroom homes or 2 spaces for 2+ bedroom homes. Municipal land use commissions have the opportunity to further reduce parking requirements below legislation enforcement or abolish them altogether depending on the needs of the town. Again, very important to note that this regulation is context specific. What may be appropriate for one town or zone may not be appropriate for others. Data evaluation is required in order to make a sound decision. And because of this, many communities choose to opt out of the above provision in Public Act 2129. Again, the City of Hartford has eliminated parking minimums citywide. This has allowed builders to no longer pass on the expense of required parking onto tenants or property owners, making way to more affordable housing options. Non-essential demolition of natural landscapes will decrease as a result, giving the opportunity to build more climate resilient conscious areas within Hartford. This is a picture of a building that was converted to apartments in downtown Hartford after parking mandates were lifted. Because of these eliminated mandates, developers are now able to renovate buildings in a quicker and more efficient manner without the struggle of providing more than necessary parking. Lands can be utilized for better value with less constraint on the city's tax base. Next, we will discuss how prohibiting substantial improvements, or SI, to non-conforming uses or structures in flood-prone areas can promote resilience. Prohibiting substantial improvements in flood zones breaks the cycle of flood repair to structures that no longer conform to current zoning codes, ultimately decreasing flood damages and increasing public safety and creating more resilient communities. Substantial improvement is any reconstruction, rehabilitation, addition, or other improvement of a structure, the cost of which equals or exceeds 50% of the market value of the structure before the start of construction of the improvement. The term includes structures that have incurred substantial damage, regardless of the cause of damage and regardless of the cost of repairs performed. SI provisions are included within floodplain ordinances that must meet the minimum National Flood Insurance Program, or NFIP standards. This provides regulation on reconstruction that may now be in potential flood zones due to changed weather patterns and climate change. This can include coastal areas, regions introduced to river flooding caused by increased precipitation, and poorly drained areas. The diagram on the right showcases how substantial improvements are calculated. The cost of improvement, such as an addition or renovation to a structure, divided by the market value of the structure equals the percentage of the improvement. If that percentage of improvement is greater than or equal to 50%, it is classified as substantial improvement and must be brought into compliance with municipal ordinance. For example, the structure must be elevated to or above base flood elevation, or perhaps be constructed with water-resistant materials in flood-prone areas. If the percentage of improvement does not classify as substantial, then compliance with new construction ordinances is not necessary. Some communities choose to adopt more strict percentages from 50% to 40% to classify substantial improvement. This revised percentage allows municipalities to increase their community resiliency against flooding and sea level rise. Strict substantial improvement codes disrupt the repetitive cycle of flood disaster damage to reconstruction to recurrent injury. Municipalities can revise the Substantial Improvement Code to enhance resiliency or better serve their goals and needs. Local requirements can be more restrictive than NFIP minimum requirements. Examples of how to do this are by adopting a threshold below 50%, tracking costs of improvements and repairs over a specific time period or look back, or requiring elevation higher than the base flood elevation mandated by NFIP. It is important that towns continue to work with FEMA in developing flood risk maps that incorporate climatic trends and mandate substantial improvement codes. This will lessen climate vulnerability within communities by reducing flood risks when planning infrastructure improvements and developments. By adopting SI codes and revising them to be even more strict than NFIP standards, municipalities can create climate resilience by decreasing flood damages, decreasing injury and emergency response, and create possible retreat to the less vulnerable inland regions. Next, we will be discussing overlay districts. As sea levels rise and precipitation patterns change, overlay zones can be an important zoning tool to enhance coastal and floodplain resilience. Overlay zones are established to provide additional regulation beyond baseline zoning in particular areas. Overlay zones can be used in many contexts, such as historic preservation, flood protection zones and waterfronts, riparian corridors, pedestrian-friendly zoning, or transportation-oriented development. This added layer of protection in areas with site-specific concerns can require additional building standards or conservation measures that may enhance climate resilience. In 2021, Connecticut Public Act 2129 revised the Zoning Enabling Act to specifically authorize municipalities to adopt zoning regulations to allow overlay zones, floating zones, planned development districts, and cluster zones. Overlay zones can now be used for a wider range of purposes, like fostering climate resilience, without concern of legal challenge. Overlay zone standards can be implemented by right or permit to provide a targeted layer of protections for vulnerable areas. The Connecticut Coastal Management Act authorized the creation of coastal overlay zones to regulate coastal development and limit the impact of flooding and erosion. While the Act does not specifically refer to climate resilience, the purpose and criteria are consistent with fostering a climate resilient coastal area. For example, following the Coastal Management Act standards, the coastal overlay zone of the town of Greenwich has strict criteria for project approvals, requires site plan review, and prioritizes protection of the natural environment and coastal resources. Coastal overlay zones could be adapted to address climate resilience more directly by adding resilient design requirements. Using best evidence sea level rise modeling to discern a flood overlay zone boundary inclusive of FEMA 100-year flood zones would be best practice for a municipality to provide appropriate flood protection zoning regulations in coastal areas. Municipalities can use CIRCA's Sea Level Rise and Storm Surge Viewer tool to establish predicted low-lying and flood-prone areas that can benefit from the additional regulation of overlay zones. By utilizing additional resilient design standards in overlay zones, climate impacts can be addressed more directly. Specific resilient design standards will be discussed in Module 3 of this training. For data description and usage of CIRCA's Sea Level Rise and Storm Surge Viewer tool, visit the CIRCA website. Overlay zoning can allow for flexibility of standards, for example, to accommodate the elevation of buildings in a flood zone. Local governments can use overlay zones to better regulate characteristics like breakaway walls, setbacks, elevation standards, impervious surface requirements, or development densities to manage coastal sprawl or limit development in sensitive areas. The National Flood Insurance Program requires minimum flood protection regulation to be enforced by participating municipalities in the 100-year flood zones as set forth by FEMA flood maps. However, to enhance the climate resilience of their communities, some municipalities have increased the minimum flood protection requirements above the federal and state level standards. This proactively decreases future flood vulnerability and extends flood prevention requirements beyond the FEMA 100-year flood boundary. Here we highlight the use of a tiered overlay zoning structure based on sea level rise. A tiered zoning approach can enhance resiliency by mitigating climate risks that are site-specific. A municipality may choose to divide their 100-year floodplain into defined overlays for more site-specific regulation. A tiered approach can accommodate finer hazard risks and revamp regulation geared specifically by location. A protection zone can encourage green infrastructure, yet rely heavily on hard armored flood protection infrastructure to protect critical frameworks in dense development. Throughout an accommodation zone, setbacks, infrastructure elevation, and stronger building codes can be utilized in preparation for predicted sea level rise and new flood zones in non-critical areas. Lastly, a conservation zone tier can focus on natural flood protection that is already in place, such as marshes or other wetland structures. This zone has an overall goal of development retreat and natural protection and open space replacement. South Kingstown, Rhode Island established a coastal resiliency overlay district to specifically address the effects of climate change by promoting awareness of future projections of sea level rise and the associated impacts from flooding and storm surge to current and future property owners. This overlay area is susceptible to a 100-year storm surge in combination with a 5-foot sea level rise that lies outside of FEMA's special flood hazard area. Projected sea level rise data from NOAA is recorded by the South Kingstown's Planning Department and is required to be accessed by future property owners in the overlay area. By educating potential property owners on the risks of climate change to their property, South Kingstown hopes to influence property owners to make decisions that are responsive to the changing climate and weather patterns. This concludes Module 2 of CIRCA's Zoning for Climate Resilience training. Please be sure to head over to Module 3, where we will discuss zoning-related tools to address climate vulnerabilities. Please visit the Climate Resilient Zoning Library on the CIRCA website to view our fact sheets containing additional information. We thank you for your participation today. Please contact us with any questions or concerns.